And so work-life balance for a large part is a misnomer because they're trying to chase work-life balance rather than trying to create the components where the default will be work-life balance.
Hello, and welcome to Sharp, the podcast where we help you get a little better at the stuff you have to do, so you can spend more time doing the stuff you want to do. So now, on with the episode. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 75. So, following a recent tradition of doing the intro in weird places, today I'm in the garage. Let's see if you can get an audio picture. I have posted a picture of where I'm in the garage. Here are the tools in here. Very echoey room full of stuff. It's a garage, that's not much else to tell you really. Hello Pepper. That's definitely going on the podcast. Anyway, never mind all that. This episode features a great conversation with Aaron Morton. Now, Aaron is a personal trainer, but unlike your average personal trainer, Aaron also helps people with their relationship to health, psychology, and nutrition. He helps people get better by looking at the bigger picture, not just the stuff that happens in the gym. Now, how would I describe this conversation? I'm a bit rambly, but what I love is I feel like you kind of get sucked into this relaxing conversation, and then, before you know it, we've covered really significant and helpful topics. We talk about things like what you pay attention to, like your breath, how a framework can free you up to do what's important, the idea that discipline is freedom. And we cover big topics like happiness and confidence, and how in Aaron's experience, these things come as a byproduct of other things. And towards the end, we talk about willpower versus habit. Now that bit came out of the blue. To be honest, if you only take one thing away from this chat, that end part alone is well worth it. Now, as is the case these days, technology tried to get in the way of making this episode happen in two ways. The first way is there's a few little audio glitches in there, but that's the technology we were using, wanted to make an appearance, and it did. But to be honest, I think the content is so good, I don't think it matters. However, we did have a big issue at the start when we'd been chatting for ages, and then I looked down and I noticed that the software hadn't been doing the job that it was meant to do. And we had to start again. Aaron was tremendously patient, and you join us as we hit record for the second time, and this time, thank goodness, it worked. Oh, and come back at the end for an announcement about the future of this podcast. Good afternoon, Aaron. How are you, and where are you?
I'm good, and I'm based in Cardiff, so that's where I am at the moment.
Oh, fantastic! How's the weather in Cardiff?
The weather is overcast, which is better than what it normally is, which is raining. So, with hay fever running strong, I'm kind of hoping for that rain to arrive at some point.
Well, I really like your positive attitude. Thank you. It's overcast is better than raining. We like positive people on this podcast.
Absolutely.
Thanks ever so much for joining us. We have got so much to talk about, some of which will feel a bit like deja vu. First of all, I have to ask you: do you have socks on?
I do. I have
what colour are your socks?
As well, luckily, they are black.
They're black. Okay.
Yes, they are.
Do you usually wear black socks every day?
I do. I don't own many coloured socks. It's all black, I'm afraid.
Don't be afraid.
They kind of go for it with everything, don't they? So
yeah, absolutely. Aaron, I'm so excited to talk to you because we'll get into the detail of it, but there appear to be really, really strong overlaps between some of the areas you work in and a lot of what we cover in this podcast. You may or may not know, but the strapline for our podcast is we want to help people get better at the stuff that they have to do so they can then spend more time doing the things they want to do. And at face value, that appears to set up a bit of a conflict between the stuff we have to do, which you might think is work stuff, and the stuff we want to do, which is personal stuff. But actually, there is a little bit more to it, because arguably the stuff that you have to do may also be the stuff that you want to do. And some people out there may love their job and they may want to just get better at it and do more of it. And I know a lot of people will think about exercise as something they have to do. And some people will think about exercise as a negative thing. But in what you do, you not only help people with physical fitness, you also help people with their mental approach, their wider life stuff, how they fit that all into having a busy life. Have I got that right? Have I described what you do relatively accurately?
Yeah, the ideal picture of what I do. Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's people come for personal training, so I always got to make sure I abide by that. They wouldn't quite like it if they came to exercise and we sat down on the sofa and talked about their life for an hour. I always say that when you talk about weight loss, you have the common formula is calories in, calories out. So to lose weight, you need to eat less calories than you expend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the grand scale of things, yes, it is. But there's a whole myriad of stuff around it that influences your decisions about what and how much you eat.
Okay.
The reason being is because we're part of a system. The act of eating is part of a system that involves your life. And so the things that happen before that decision of what and how you are going to eat is a large factor. So while someone is coming for personal training in order to lose weight, get fitter, improve their back pain and things like that, that's almost the front face of what you see, but behind it all is a whole array of decisions, influences, and beliefs, values, everything mixed in together. And then what comes out of it is, I want to lose weight, I want to improve my back pain. And so the notion of what you're going to do, that person's going to do in order to improve those, is largely influenced by the same things. So by me talking to them about various about what they do in the day, what their family is, what they think about this, what they think about that, what they've done in that week, it starts to build a picture.
Okay.
And then when you are aware of that picture, then you can start to help influence it in some way. So, for example, a guy came to me once, and he was a managing director of a plumbing company, and his wife, I think, sent him, which is never a great start. But he was open minded. He was an open minded guy, and so so he wanted to lose weight and exercise. So first thing was like, what do you tend to eat? And he said, I have a pack of crisps every day. We have a takeaway on a Friday, the usual stuff.
Yeah.
So rather than saying, right, what you need to do is a meal plan, follow it, and then if you follow it, you'll lose weight. I said, well, what can we do with your crisps that we could agree on? And so he agreed that he's going to have one pack of crisps a week. Sorry. And so we started with that. And then when he was doing that, and in amongst all the personal training, and he started to lose weight, then you start the momentum, and then you start to build on that momentum to the point that a year later we introduce fasting. There's 3 aspects of fasting, where some would see the more extreme version of being a 24-hour fast, once or twice a week. When I explained the fasting options, he chose a 24-hour one. Now, if at the very first session I said, right, we're going to do a 24-hour fast 1 day a week, he would probably say no, and he probably wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But through that generative change, he a year in, he was able to say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a 24-hour fast once a week, and he did it, and he got benefit from that. And that's now in order for us to agree upon that, we had to develop a relationship between a trainer and client, and part of that involved me knowing more about his life. And so when I encounter personal training, it's looking at the person's whole life to be able to influence their whole life rather than just about movement.
Okay. You when we've talked before, you've talked about things like how people breathe, how much sleep they get, what else is going on in their life, they're sleeping. What got you into this world? Why do you do this? Why do you do this?
Well, personally, I was always into fitness and exercise. So I've always done. I did football, and then I'm doing martial arts, and I did sports science at university,
Okay.
and the natural progression from that, after the mind numbing boredom of admin work after university, was to become a personal trainer. I say mind numbing boring, but it actually opened my eyes to just listening to office workers and talking, hearing them talk about diets and hearing about talk about
Right.
their mindset. So it was a good observation of such. So it was a good experience to be part of that world. But then I became a personal trainer, and on top of that, I done hypnotherapy and trained in NLP, neuro linguistic programming,
Mm-hmm.
and interest in psychology, and was a nutritionist as well, trained as a nutritionist. So it's almost like ticking all of those boxes and then bringing it all together
Mm.
to try to um, create a service that is slightly different to maybe like your some other personal trainer. And so when the independent gym that I worked from, it was associated closely with a physiotherapist as well. So we were very much in favor of movement rather than exercise, and improving someone's movement to be able to help prevent or reduce injury. And where we were based, it was amongst a lot of law firms. So I trained a
Right.
lot of senior lawyers, but also junior lawyers. And what was good about that is you can almost create the timeline between when the lawyer first starts and then see where they can end up, and looking at the different issues that they face from a physiological perspective. So you can see that when they start as a new graduate, as a junior lawyer,
Yeah.
so quite young, in the mid to late 20s, and then a senior partner in his 45 upwards,
Mm-hmm.
with lower back pain, the pressures of, it's usually three kids. It's normally always three kids, and a private school, and all of those things, and they're traveling a lot, and lawyers about very much relationship management, so they're always out late and things like that. So
Yeah.
you see that timeline, and you see what happens with the body, and that's a good education to see what happens there.
Now you're talking about it. I mean, we've got three kids actually between us, and I think it's fascinating that you would not think of things like exercise or training in isolation to everything else, but how those things join up. And there's a huge amount of overlap between lots of the subjects we've covered in previous episodes, because recently we did an episode on work-life balance.
Mm.
And actually we were identifying this kind of misnomer, really. That's the conclusion we came to, that the aim of trying to find work-life balance is actually not very helpful, because when you dig into it and you say to someone, well, what do you mean by work-life balance? You straight away, it suggests there's a conflict between how I feel about life when I'm doing the work stuff and how I feel about life when I'm doing the life stuff.
Mm.
And we looked at a few different TED presentations that were always good value, and kind of came to the conclusion that actually really it is all life. You've got to take a step back and say, actually, and here we're fans of long-term goal setting. In fact, I've just changed jobs recently. I'm a freelance trainer now, And I've been in learning and development for a long time. I love it. I love helping people get better at stuff. So I did my sort of annual review. I just take a step back and say, okay, where am I going to be in 2 years and 5 years, and what has to happen to get there, and breaking that down into little stages. And I do think it's really useful to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and start to think about how those things, the relationships that the different things have with each other, and how doing regular exercise can make you feel about work, and equally how your working day can make you feel about exercise. I mean, you must have examples there of where the approach you've taken has helped people where just focusing on the physical side wouldn't necessarily have worked.
You tend to find that in someone that is very close to burnout.
Okay.
You have someone that's wired, and it's quite good. It's quite good actually. A tale of two. It's quite a tale of two lawyers who they're in the same place in their workplace, where one of them never missed an appointment, where the other one was constantly missing an appointment. And the one that never missed an appointment, they never missed an appointment because they saw it as a resource to their work, so it gave them energy. Whereas the other one saw it as a distraction as such, and so they had to cancel Wednesday. But when someone's close to burnout, exercise is stress on the body. It is a stressor. So that for that person, they either need to step back and reassess what's going on in their life. Normally, they're one-way ticket to at least going off work for a period of time, or learn to slow down their exercise, because obviously if they're in a state where they're constantly going like under a mile an hour, more than likely they tend to want their exercise to be under a mile an hour. So you need to start to guide them towards some slowing it down a little bit. But the whole notion of work-life balance is a bit of a misnomer as such, and because in the same way that when you talk about chasing happiness, those that chase happiness very rarely find happiness, and those that almost create their life in the way that they want to have happiness as a byproduct. In the same way, confident when you try to create confidence doesn't always happen. It's only until you look at what the components of confidence are, that confidence comes as a byproduct, as a result. That can either be in the competency of what you're doing, the work, which means that you're confident in your work, or if you're confident socially, tends to be as a result of doing a lot of social activities, not trying to be confident. And so work-life balance for a large part is a misnomer, because for a large part they're trying to chase work-life balance rather than trying to create the components where the default will be work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people thought that would be the case when COVID hit, and so they started to work from home. And although it's certainly given more people flexibility, so more people, for example, are able to book sessions during the day for PT, a lot more than what they previously did. It was always a nightmare trying to get people at the beginning and end of the day, and when you had a client that could have a session during the day, it was almost like the golden client. But this notion of work-life balance, you have to try and not make it a thing that you're trying to chase. You've got to create it as such. For a large part, you're not always in control of that, so that can take time. Like if you're not always in control of what shifts you can do, or how your work is created, especially with the lawyers, for example, it can become a trap, because if you're on a couple of $100,000 a year and you're trying to create a work-life balance, you're not always going to quit your job, because you've got to make up that monthly income. You're not always, if you're in the relationship management business, which essentially law is, you still got a lot of responsibilities. So this can take time. And so for a large part, work-life balance can be about patience more than anything. Patience in creating what you want. And it's not always going to come overnight, in the same way health doesn't come overnight. And that can be an issue. What I call the are we there yet mentality. You say you want something and you're like, am I there yet? Am I there yet? Well, this can take time. It's a cumulative effect.
Yeah. And I also think that your outlook on life, you talked there about chasing happiness, and my personal view is that many of us focus on the gap. We focus on what we haven't achieved. We focus on the difference between where we are and where we want to be, as opposed to actually focusing on what we have achieved, what we have succeeded. And my view is that if you want to understand a little bit about what happiness is about, it is actually about focusing on what you have achieved and the movement you've made, whether it's in exercise, health, fitness, work, whatever, rather than you not being where you want to be. So this must be, it must be a tremendously rewarding pastime, lifestyle. How would you describe what you do? Because it doesn't. It sounds a lot more than just a job. It sounds like a vocation, and actually, presumably, you live your life in the same way.
Yeah, I do. I always say, like, what other profession do you get to spend an hour with someone where you can help them with exercise, but also find out about their life. You don't get that with a GP,
Yeah.
and you don't always get that with a therapist, because you're very if you go with a therapist, it might be a single modality that you're working on. So with personal training, especially the way that I do personal training, is that, from a holistic perspective, you do find out a lot. Like you end up clients end up sharing quite a lot in that way, and as a result, you can in some way work to give them more than just the exercise. You can kind of help them with, with certain, if they've got certain troubles in their life, not like psychological troubles, but
Mm-hmm.
problems that they might talk through, and you can provide an outside perspective, because someone might say, "Oh, it's good that I can speak in that about that, because if I speak to a family member, they're invested in the other person, that they know the other person, so they have a certain bias." So you have that, so it is rewarding in that sense, but it's also rewarding because I'm interested in this area of health, psychology, nutrition, and this kind of works. This works. All of these, but I'm also interested in business, and interested in current affairs, and the people that I tend to work with. They're in business, they're busy professionals, so they tend to have an interest in those areas. So they have a lot to talk about, and in amongst that, I'm helping them with their health, which is, and sometimes you've got to hold the space for them, because they don't always have the belief that they can do something. So someone doesn't always come in and say, I want to lose weight, or and you're like, and they're like, yeah, and I know I can lose weight. Sometimes it's I want to lose weight, or I want to get fitter, but I failed a lot in the past. And they don't always say that explicitly. They might say it implicitly, and so that's where the coaching aspect is. It is that notion sometimes where you're like a pilot, and you're constantly going off course, and you're kind of
Bringing it
guiding
back
them
again.
back,
Yeah.
and so they're talking about something. You're trying to reframe it back, so you can kind of bring them back to thinking in a way where they're more likely to achieve
Yeah.
what they want to achieve. And so, that comes from the psychology, like not listening to their language. I had a great one the other week. You said, the person said, it feels like I'm in a cell. Yeah, and then when I asked them, where do you see yourself in 6 months or so, and they're like, well, I can't see that far forward in the future. Well, it's
Wow.
no surprise if you see yourself in a cell,
Yeah.
and not being able to recognize that, that holds a large part of their problem, and being able to problem solve that then, and try to break it down into a smaller piece that they are able to manage,
Okay.
is a rewarding aspect to it as well.
I bet. So, given that I know you're very busy because you had clients this morning. When we finish, you're going to go off to other clients. how do you manage your time? How do you make sure you're productive? What disciplines have you got in place?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm the most productive person in the world in terms of, I get stuff done, obviously, but in terms of other responsibilities, I'm at an age where I don't have kids and things like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's it. But a list is a big factor.
Yep.
I'm very aware that if I don't have a list, I use that to-do list. Is it todolist.com? I think. Yeah. I use that. I'm also I also enjoy just browsing stuff, like stuff that I'm interested in, but just browsing, going
Okay.
from Wikipedia to a website to this, and I was like, oh, I could maybe buy that and things like that.
Yeah.
So I got to keep focused by having a list of what I need to do that day, and because the notion of clients might be in the morning, and then I come back, and then I've got another client a couple of hours later, really making use of that time. So I started up a YouTube channel, for example. So that's a new skill that I have to develop. So
Wow.
filming that, editing that, sending it off to the actual editor, then doing bloody thumbnails and all that stuff, and then trying to promote it and stuff like that takes a lot of time. So it's breaking those tasks down, and then being able to put it into a to-do list of sorts, and then being able to act that out. So some call that task decomposition. You have a big task, and then you can break it down to
Yep.
be able to put it into manageable pieces, and then go through it one by one until it's completed, and then you can do the next stage. So I do that quite a bit.
So that's really interesting, because you started off by saying, I'm not the most productive person, and then you've just described something that most people don't do, which is, what's in most people, a lot of people that struggle with getting everything done in the day, getting things sorted, don't take the time to look at the task and say, okay, let me break that down into its component pieces and focus on its component pieces. So if you've got to sort a gift out for your mum for a birthday, or Auntie Mabel, or whoever it is, just writing down, sort out Auntie Mabel's gift, that's not actually a clear definition of the actions you've got to take. The actions you've got to take are research what gift you want to get, go and buy it, wrap it up, post it, give it to her, or however you're going to present it. So by breaking things down into their discrete components, and then being clear about what are the actual things I can do with my hands, arms, legs, mouth, head, whatever, that's the trick. That's the trick that lots of people miss out on. They have this nebulous idea that there is something I have to do, sort birthday, or clear garage, or sort car, but actually don't take the time to stop and think about, okay, so what are the pieces? And then by focusing on the pieces, then you get progress. So you
The
are.
funny thing is the funny thing is when you're working with clients, that you notice different mindsets. So, for example, you could have a project manager that is perfectly able to break stuff down,
Yes.
but then wants to lose 3 stone in a month, and you realize that they see it as a big thing
Yes.
that they have to achieve, and they haven't necessarily broke it down and presented that time frame, and seen where that is. Or you'll have someone that hasn't really learned the skill set of solving problems, so that their ability to think through an issue hasn't been nurtured in a way. So when they get to an issue of, oh, I haven't lost as much as I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
right? What can we do next? Oh, I don't know. And that don't know is a block. It's like a threshold to their thinking as such, because when they've encountered a problem before, that's the point where they've either given up or said, sod it, I'm gonna binge eat or whatever. And so you recognize when you're talking to someone where their threshold of thinking is.
Okay.
And so that ability then stops them from breaking something down and going, right, okay, what are the component pieces of this, and going and then working from there. taking a step back, going laterally, going through, and things like that. So the ability to, and that's why I think, like, the ability to think is a fantastic skill to nurture. But because we all think in some capacity, in the same way that we all breathe in some capacity, it's never seen as something that needs to be worked on, and it definitely does, because you got to recognize the components required to solve a problem, go from A to B. Say this is like that. Yeah. So what you've done previously can help you what you've done in what you do now. That's why I use jiu-jitsu as a metaphor a lot of the times, because or driving, because it can help you see that this problem you're facing is something you've encountered before, and there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to most problems, and so that gives you and puts you in a state of mind to be able to solve that problem then.
Yeah. What you just said there really interests me, actually. That idea of things like breathing, for example, which I'd imagine most people have the view that is a fairly instinctive action, but how much more powerful it can be when you think about how you're breathing and actually take time to apply some thought to it instead of just doing what you think happens instinctively. We talked before about the power of thinking about where in the body you're breathing from and so on. Just say a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I see clients for the first time, I will ask them to lie down, find a spot on the ceiling, and just take 5 deep breaths. And what that allows me to see is where they're breathing from. Are they breathing all through the mouth or through the nostrils? And where their body raises when they inhale. And for a lot of people, I'm talking about 9 out of 10 people, they breathe from the chest. Now, if you look at a baby breathing when they're sleeping, they'll breathe from the diaphragm. That is the correct way of breathing from the diaphragm. Now, when someone breathes from the chest, they breathe very shallowly. So they'll inhale quite shallow, and then they'll exhale quite quickly. Now, the exhale is largely related to what's known as the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's rest and digest. It's if you ever do any like meditation exercises or relaxation exercises, they tend to say to elongate the breath. But if you're not able to breathe properly, you're not able to elongate the breath because you haven't taken in enough oxygen to be able to then exhale. So we practice to expand the diaphragm as you're breathing in. As you breathe in, you expand the diaphragm. Now that then allows you to be able to comfortably exhale in an elongated way. What it also does, though, is a fundamental part of core stability is the ability to co-contract your muscles around your spine. And they only co-contract when you're able to expand the diaphragm. So breathing is a massively important thing. But as one client said to me, you're just going to tell me to breathe. And it's like, because we do it so naturally, it's almost thrown off. I mean, up until maybe like a couple of years, up until Wim Hof came out with his Wim Hof method, and James Nestor came out with the Breathe book, and in some aspects of mindfulness meditation, no one really paid attention to breathing, to be honest. It's only in the last 2 years that it's become more popular, and so it's massively important because it helps regulate your blood pressure, it helps you get into a relaxed state, it helps in regards to your fitness. In meditation, they tend to start in terms of breathing as your anchor point, being aware of your breathing. And so being able to have practice your breathing is a fundamental part of physical health and mental health, essentially. So I tend to have that as an important aspect.
something that seems to be a fairly common thread through what you're talking about is this idea of paying attention to things that your average person takes for granted. You've talked about breathing. We talked about sleeping. Obviously, you focus on nutrition. Another area that I'm always interested in is relationships and relationships with people, because a few years ago, Lisa and I decided she finally cracked, and I managed to convince her that we should have a weekly meeting. And her view was that why do we have to have a weekly meeting? That's a work thing. Why do we need to have a weekly meeting?
Yeah.
And actually, we now have a Sunday afternoon, usually, a conversation where we think about how the last week's gone. We think about how we have interacted with each other. What's been great? What's been less great? Who's cooking what when in the coming weeks? So there's lots of practical stuff. Who's home? Who's out? Who's away? Where are the kids? That kind of stuff. Because actually, if you get those things sorted, then there is time for your relationship to flourish. Whereas actually, if you don't sort out those basics, if you don't sort out those practical things, then your relationship becomes a victim of your life. It becomes a victim of how stressed and frenetic and everything else is, and there is no time for the relationship. And we've learned, particularly over the last couple of years, where we've started to do this a bit more robustly each week, that taking the time to just stop and think about your relationship and what's worked, what hasn't worked, what's coming up in this next week, what do we need to think about, and so on. It's massively impactful in an area that some people think, well, if the relationship's any good, it should just be good on its own. I shouldn't have to put any work into it. And we all know you do need to put work into it. And I think that idea of paying attention to things that we might take for granted. We talked in an episode recently about the Matthew Walker book about sleep. Same thing, how powerful sleep is and how much impact it has on your life. I think it's great that these areas are starting to be talked about, and they're not considered to be niche or unusual or different, and they have massive impact. And clearly, you're focusing on them and you're having success with them.
There's something known in physical fitness called GPP, which is General Physical Preparedness. And then if you're into a sports team, you'll have something called SPP, which is Specific Physical Preparedness. And so when I see clients, I always come with the idea of this general physical preparedness. So if you want, and the way I describe it is, if you want to be in a situation that if you need to lift something, you can lift it. If you need to run, you can run. If you need to jump, you're able to jump. You don't want to be wondering or hoping that you can do it when the time comes for you to do it. And it's happened with this. It brought more home in regards to the COVID factor, is that you don't know what's around the corner, and you don't know who is going to be predominantly most vulnerable to. Unfortunately, in this COVID, it's targeted mostly the older generation and people that are obese and largely overweight.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, with regards to talking about health and immunity and things like that, the best thing you can do is just have this general physical preparedness. And it's the same what you're talking about in your relationship and the meetings. You could say that's the you could call that general relationship preparedness, in the sense of when you have that framework, like that meeting, if something arises, is if your bath suddenly falls through the ceiling, hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, you have that framework already in place in your relationship to be able to solve that problem already. Whereas if you never talked, if you came home one day, you go upstairs, your wife goes downstairs, and you never talk, and then the bathroom comes through the ceiling. You're like, right, so who's dealing with this then? Right, so where's the bills, or who's repairing this? So it starts to solve a lot more problem. It solves a lot more problems before they even happen. And so when I see clients, when I work with clients, and the general approach to things is, if you can have this increased level of general physical preparedness, then things become a lot easier in life, and then you can free up, like you say, free up your brain power to do the things that you want to do, in order to, and that as a result of that, you become less stressed. You become healthier because you're exercising more, but you don't feel like it's a strain to exercise. You don't feel like it's you can't do it. You just do it. And so when a problem does arise, you're a lot more confident to be able to solve it, because you have all these examples of previous times where you've solved problems quite easily.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. I was listening to a podcast earlier on today, and it was David Allen's GTD, and he was talking about GTD for creative people, and this idea that having a system or a structure in place, some creative people think it's anathema. They think that it's going to dampen my creativity. It's going to take away my spontaneity. But actually, it's opening up to the fact that if you have a system in place or you have a structure in place, that then puts you in a position where you have the free space to have the spontaneity, to have the creativity. And as you've said there, the framework that you have in place, so then you know how to deal with the bath falling through your ceiling. I really hope none of our listeners have a bath fall through their ceiling.
No,
obviously, Aaron, that's your fault. But having that system in place is super helpful, because it then frees you up to be able to think about the important things.
Well, the guy that has the podcast, Jocko Willink,
yes,
the tagline he has is "Discipline is freedom," and that's essentially his premise. Is the idea that if you have the discipline, then you have the freedom to be able to do other stuff, because the stuff that you need to do is done at a time that of your choosing, and so that frees up your time, frees up your mind. And with creatives, one of the issues that a lot of creatives have is that my brain's just buzzing all the time, and then I try to get to sleep and I can't turn my brain off. Whereas if you look at Stephen King, for example, here you look at his routine. It's I go into the room at 9 o'clock, I put the music on, I write to 12 o'clock, and then I'm done. Right. Now, he's prolific in his writing because he's got that structure. And when he goes into that room, he knows that he's writing. Now, he might have ideas outside of that time, and maybe he has a notebook. A lot of creative people do have notebooks where they'll write down ideas. But he's disciplined in the sense that he knows that time is the time that I'm writing. Outside of that, I'll write the idea, but I'll add to it in that 9 to 12 period.
Yeah.
Whereas you might have someone else who's like, "Oh, I'm writing. Oh, I'm going to sit down now, but I can't think of anything else I can't think of anything to write," and things like that. And then the Seinfeld chain method, where he's like, "Well, just write something to continue the chain." So even if it's a sentence, then you break down, and that goes into exercise as well. A lot of people, when they think about exercise, they think about, in their head, they have it framed as an hour and a half sweating profusely, and it has to be at a gym. Yeah. Whereas you could do a workout the last 10 minutes in your house in a space of the size of a yoga mat. And it's just the ability to be able to have that flexibility, but then that gives you the discipline to be able to have your session and then get on with the rest of your day. Yeah. And so all these things come together then, and that again goes back to how you think about the situation, and then how you solve whatever issues that come up to be able to do it and then get on with the rest of your life.
I've just been making notes while we've been talking. You have talked about so much interesting stuff and such a diverse range. Some of the things we've talked about so far are thinking about what you pay attention to, whether it's your breath, whether it's your relationship, whether it's your diet. You talked about the challenges of a project manager who struggles to take the steps they would take at work in their personal life to lose 3 stone.
Yeah.
GPP and SPP, general physical preparedness and SPP was
specific physical
preparedness. Yeah. And then we got onto that conversation about, I like GRP, general relationship preparedness. Have you just invented that?
Just came up with it.
Okay, listen, we're having that. That's become a registered trademark of Aaron Morton and Sharp Podcast. But having a framework,
could have done with that.
having a framework which then frees you up to do the stuff that's important. You said that those people that chase happiness rarely find happiness, and actually, if you try to create confidence, it doesn't happen. It happens as a byproduct of doing other things. So confidence comes as a byproduct of being social. It comes as a byproduct of focusing on your competencies. You talked about discipline being freedom. We've talked about crisps. We talked about Stephen King and Seinfeld's approach to getting things done. Stephen King, 3 hours a day, music on, 9 till 12. Seinfeld, it's a chain. Just do something. Just write anything and keep it going. And then you've talked about how you get stuff done by taking your task and breaking them down into component elements and just delivering those elements. You talked about language. That's a really amazing story of someone feeling like they're in a cell. And when you ask them where they're going to be in 6 months, they can't even see that. That's phenomenal. We've talked about breathing. We've talked about James Nestor's book, Breath. Lots of other resources referred to, which I'll put links in the show notes. Keith Johnson, Jocko Willink. What haven't I asked you that I should have asked you?
Well, I would have said what socks am I wearing, but you asked that at the beginning, so I can't say that. I guess what my future plans are. Maybe that might be a good one.
Yeah. What are your future plans, Aaron?
Well, I plan on doing more online stuff in the future. So I've got a website called Fit by Health. So that's more my online things and trying to create programs around that. There's already one called Stressless on there, which is almost like a 3-stage approach to handling stress in a more effective way. And I'm looking to do an online PT program, which is called the Health Protocol, and that's essentially looking at initially weight loss, but ultimately looking to transition from that weight loss mindset over to more of a what I call a health nurture mindset. But when I surveyed a lot of people, because the common issue that a lot of people face in weight loss is emotional eating, and so getting over emotional eating is one thing, but the person still wants to lose weight. So first stage is about losing weight, but dealing somewhat with the emotional eating, and then we go to the weight maintenance stage, because that doesn't get talked about that much. You lose weight, and then what tends to happen is that you go back to the old habits, and then you gain weight again. So building on that weight maintenance stage, and then moving on to a health nurture mindset, where your focus is more on creating health seeking behaviors and being less focus on the weight and more focus on creating health and building health and nurturing health. So that's an online program that I'm looking to create and have somewhat unpopular views on mental health and body positivity. And I say unpopular; they're more like things that that are different to the body positivity activists and things like that. So so surveying my way through social media, I guess.
Here's a question for you that's just dropped into my head. I'm really interested in your view. What is your view on willpower?
It's something that is over relying on, and whilst you may require a little bit of it at the beginning stages, if you're relying on in the later stages, it means that you haven't created a habit as such. Because if you go back to the old like the framework of willpower, where they did the Marshmallow Test, if you
just tell our listeners
what
that Marshmallow Test for anybody that isn't sure.
So the Marshmallow Test was predominantly conducted on children. They said, and they had a child at a table, and they said, "Here's a marshmallow. If you if I'm going out of the room and if you haven't eaten it by the time I get back, you can have two marshmallows. And then they basically filmed the children and how and saw what they did and compared then the kids that were able to resist eating the marshmallow and those that didn't, and then trialed them through their life and saw where they ended up to a certain extent. And it's basically the premise between delayed and instant gratification. With willpower, it's also state dependent, because if I have to do some tasks in the morning, I might be able to do those tasks in the morning. But if I've had a long day where I've been stuck in traffic for the last hour and come back, and then and then I need to do those tasks, I might mug it off for a day. Does that mean I have low willpower, or does that mean I have, or I've just had a bad day? So, but it tends to be a rationale for something, like I failed on my diet because I have low willpower. Now, the problem with that statement is that it puts a full stop on your rationale of why you failed on the diet. But it could be because you haven't got a strategy, or you picked a strategy that doesn't fit within your lifestyle. So it doesn't tell the full story when someone talks about willpower, and it's more about looking at the context of which you've wanted willpower for, and the framework of which you've tried to, solve a problem or achieve something. So it's more of a distraction more than anything, willpower, because it's something that, they have willpower but I don't, and they did that because they have better willpower. Whereas more of a case of, initially it's about how you're framing the issue, and then through time it's about whether you've set up a habit to do it in an efficient way. Because willpower requires brain power, whereas habit is more it requires less energy because you've done it so often.
Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know, do you? So actually, for people that are throughout my life, I've had various stints of not drinking alcohol, and I'm now at the end of June, at the end of 18 months with no alcohol at all. And the reason that I've gone for such a long period of time without drinking alcohol this time around is three things really. My frame of mind, I was clear about my strategy, and I understood my habits. And those three things were different to all the occasions I've tried to stop drinking alcohol before, because previously I've just thought it's about willpower. Now I'm not advocating that anybody has to stop drinking alcohol or should. That's my lifestyle choice. But the point is that the difference is that actually what your frame of mind is like. Are you clear about your strategy, which usually relates to having, more than one tool in the toolbox to help you, and understanding habits and how habits work, I found to be significantly more helpful in changing an element of my lifestyle than good old-fashioned willpower.
I had one of my clients is a former alcoholic. Well, he'll say he's a current alcoholic, but he hasn't drunk in 20 years. So I have a different opinion with the Alcoholics Anonymous thing. So, but I asked him the other week. So, would you ever have a drink to see what it's like? And he was like, no, because I know that if I have it, it's like in Anthony Kiedis' book, he says, I went to the dentist. I was clean for ages. I went to the dentist. They gave me Novocaine, and within an hour, I was in an archway buying drugs.
Wow.
And it is that kind of thing. So now that's not willpower. That's him having a very rigid strategy.
Yeah.
Some would say as a protection mechanism. And habitually, the habit is him doing something else other than drinking. And so, for a large part, if you convert that around to fitness, someone that has a habit of fitness, they set up their life so fitness is a non-entity. It's a no-brainer. Whereas when you haven't exercised before, and you're trying to incorporate fitness into your life, it is it requires what some people might say is willpower, but what it's more a case of is the old habit at that stage is more familiar than the new habit that you're trying to create. And so you have to schedule exercise in until it becomes a habit, and then it becomes a no-brainer. You suddenly find the time to exercise because that's part of parcel what you're doing. Yeah. And so that's what I mean by saying that initially what someone might describe as willpower is required, but you're doing something wrong if you're still requiring willpower, a year later or 2 years later.
Yeah. Fantastic. That sounds like a great subject to bring us to close on. Can I ask you please to shamelessly plug all of your social media, your websites, your publications? Where can people find you and find out more about you?
So there's fitbyhealth.com. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Fit by Health YouTube channel, which is just starting up really, but I'm building on that. And then there's Aaron Morton CO, which is the Instagram, and then there's the Fit by Health Facebook group, which is again it's just starting out, but building as we go.
Fantastic. I shall put all of those links in the show notes so everyone can come and find you, and hopefully you can help even more people have fewer crisps in their life, amongst other things. I don't know. I've latched onto crisps.
Well, don't disregard it completely, but just have a strategy around it.
Have a crisp strategy. I think there's a title for the episode there, Aaron. Crisp strategy.
Absolutely, it's good. They'll probably think it's an acronym for something, but
Aaron, thank you ever so much for spending time. You've covered so much. Thank you so much. Really, really grateful.
You're welcome. Hope your audience finds value in it.
They definitely will. Okay. Thanks for your time. Take care, Aaron. Cheers.
See you later. Bye.
So that was Aaron Morton. I hope you enjoyed our ramble. I think it was a really great value conversation, actually, and hopefully you got loads out of it. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm not in the garage anymore. I'm back in the booth. So I mentioned there's going to be like a bit of an announcement at the end. Not a great big thing, but I just wanted to keep you updated. You might know that I've set up a business called SON Development, and I'm working really hard to make that a success. For anyone that's interested, I provide face-to-face or remote learning and development consultancy services to businesses that need help and support in areas like coaching, performance management, customer service, and loads more. If you're interested, you can have a look at the website. It's sondevelopment.com. But what's this got to do with the podcast, I hear you ask? Well, I set Sharp Podcast up as an informal way of helping you get some ideas, get some resource, and get some support to help you get better at stuff. Now, I'm providing that support to people more directly and I guess in a more formal way through SON Development. And I'm going to be creating courses and my own resource to help people. And all of that stuff, it's a business, it's going to be chargeable, it's part of the day job. And I need to find a way of blending together what we do here at Sharp Podcast with what I'm doing over at SON Development. Now, I don't really know yet how the format or the content of the podcast will evolve, but I do know that it's going to be linked to SON Development as a way of people getting free access to some of the content that I've recorded so far. Things that you've already had the benefit of. And then for those people that want to invest some time and some money in courses or some digital support, then I'll be actively promoting those solutions on here too. Now, I'm not sure what that means in terms of the regularity of the podcast or how the content will evolve. It might not change much at all, but I wanted to give you, my loyal listener, a heads up so that you're not surprised when things change and the presence of SON Development becomes a bit more obvious. Imagine it's like having a sponsor, I guess. It's that kind of thing. Anyway, I'll keep you posted. And I promise that in the not too distant future, there'll be at least one more Lisa and Steve at the kitchen table to look forward to. Anyway, that's enough for now. I'll be releasing something before the end of the year, that's for sure. And in the meantime, don't forget, there's 74 other episodes available covering Loads of stuff to help you get better at the things you have to do, so you can spend more time doing the things that you want to do. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. We hope that you enjoyed what you've just listened to. Have a look at the show notes for the episode. They're at sharppodcast.com, one word, two Ps. And there you'll see the links, resources that we used, and there's reminders there to help you get better at what we talked about. So now this is where you can help us. You can share our episodes on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. We are at Sharp Podcast, one word, two Ps. And another free way you can support is to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher app. Thanks for your help. It's really appreciated. Bye-bye.